This video is going to cover section 11.1, which is the beginning of the respiratory system. So the main function of the respiratory system is to allow oxygen from the air to enter the blood and carbon dioxide from the blood to exit into the air. Ventilation is another term for breathing and includes both inspiration and expiration. So air is conducted toward or away from the lungs by a series of cavities, tubes, and openings, most of which you can see here. Um, Beginning with the nasal cavity and the pharynx, and then the larynx, trachea, bronchus, bronchioles, the lungs, and the diaphragm. So the respiratory system, it works very closely with the circulatory system in the following homeostatic functions. There's that other great word again, homeostasis. And so what we have is external respiration. This is the exchange of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, between the air and the blood. The transport of gases to and from the lungs and tissues. And then we have the internal respiration, which is the exchange of gases between the blood and tissue fluid. Again, here's these same structures, and then you have a bit of a close-up diagram of the very ends of the lungs right down into the alveoli. So the respiratory tract then extends right from the nose to the lungs, and it's composed of the lungs, therefore are composed of air sacs, which are called alveoli. And so the gas exchange occurs between air in the alveoli and blood within the capillary network that surrounds the alveoli. So notice that the pulmonary arteriole is colored blue, and that's because it carries oxygen-poor blood away from the heart to the alveoli. Then carbon dioxide leaves the blood and oxygen enters the blood. So the pulmonary venule is colored red because it's carrying oxygen-rich blood from the alveoli back toward the heart. So the respiratory tract, inspiration is air that's it's filtered, warmed, and it's moistened as it moves along the respiratory tract, and it's filtered by hairs in the nostrils and by cilia in the mucus of the nasal cavities and airways. Um, Air then is warmed by heat given off by the blood vessels close to the lining of the airways, and the air is also moistened by the wet surface of the airways. With expiration, air cools and it loses its moisture as it moves out of the respiratory tract. And so it deposits moisture on the lining of the trachea and the nose. Here's a close-up image of the ciliated cells, and so these cells, they line the interior of the nasal passages and the upper respiratory tract. The nose then, it's the only external portion of the respiratory system, so air enters the nose through the nostrils, and air is moistened and warmed in the two nasal cavities that are lined with mucous membranes. And the nasal cavities are separated from the mouth by the palate, which is composed of the hard palate, which is the anterior portion, or the portion toward the front, and the soft palate, which is more posterior or toward the back. And you can see all of the different structures here as well as the path that air would take as it enters the nostrils and begins its journey down into the lungs. The pharynx, also known as the throat, and it connects the nasal and oral cavities to the larynx, contains lymphatic tissues called the tonsils. These contain lymphocytes and they protect against pathogens and allows for the passage of air and food. The larynx then, this is also referred to as the voice box since it contains the vocal cords. and connects the pharynx to the trachea. It's composed of cartilage and very dense connective tissue and allows for the passage of air. So the glottis allows air into the larynx, and a flap of tissue above the larynx, the epiglottis, this prevents passage of food into the lower respiratory tract. And we've looked. There was a simulation that was in the online resource, which demonstrated this quite clearly as to what takes place during swallowing to prevent food from entering into the respiratory tract. So here's a couple of. I imagine the one on the left is an actual photo of the vocal cords there, and then on the right is a diagrammatic representation of that. So you can see how they're oriented, and viewed from above, the vocal cords, they stretch across the glottis, which is the opening to the trachea. And so when air is expelled through the glottis, then the vocal cords, they vibrate, producing sound. Um, Generally speaking, the vocal cords are at rest, but when you want to make a sound, then it is actually um, I believe it's called the cricothyroid muscle, which contracts, and they then put tension on the vocal cords, which then allows them to vibrate when you put air through them. And so the glottis then is narrow when we make a high-pitched sound, and it widens as the pitch deepens. So the trachea, commonly called the windpipe, it connects the larynx with bronchi, and it's composed of C-shaped cartilaginous rings and allows for the passage of air to the bronchi. The C-shaped cartilaginous rings, those are in order to keep the passage open all the time. Like most tissues, if they don't have some kind of a hard material in them, then generally speaking, they will just simply collapse. So these have the cartilage in them in order to keep them open. Cleans, warms, and moistens the air. There's a mucous membrane lining which contains goblet cells, which produce the mucus, and the ciliated cells as well, which sweep mucus and debris toward the pharynx. Here you can see this is a scanning electron micrograph, and it shows the surface of the mucous membrane that lines the trachea. So it consists of the goblet cells, which you can see labeled, and the ciliated cells. So the cilia, they sweep mucus and the debris embedded in it toward the pharynx, where they're then swallowed or expectorated. In other words, just spit out. So smoking actually causes the cilia to disappear, which then allows more debris to enter the bronchi and the lungs, hence the smoker's cough. And so there really is something to the smoker's cough, and smoking then causes things to enter into the bronchi and lungs, which shouldn't be there. The bronchial tree then, the trachea divides into the bronchi, which lead into the lungs. They branch into secondary bronchi that lead to bronchioles, and each bronchiole leads to thin-walled air sacs called the alveoli. This is the site of the gas exchange between the air and the blood. The components of the bronchial tree beyond the primary bronchi then make up the tissue of the lungs. So the lungs are paired. They're kind of cone-shaped sort of organs. They contain the alveoli, airways, and the blood vessels. The base of the lungs is the diaphragm, and this is the muscle that's involved in inspiration and expiration. Among others, there's other muscles involved there too, which raise the rib cage for inspiration. And The diaphragm itself actually, when it contracts, then it actually lowers, and so thereby expanding the volume um, of the space for the lungs. So each lung is covered with a thin membrane called a pleura, which secretes fluid so that it can slide freely against the pleura of the chest wall and diaphragm during inspiration and expiration. During inhalation, air enters the lungs by way of the bronchial tree, moves to the alveoli, and gas exchange occurs between the air in the alveolus and the blood in the capillaries. So alveoli are covered with a pulmonary surfactant. This is a film of lipoprotein, and that prevents the alveoli from closing. So once again, if that wasn't present, then they would just simply collapse. And here you can see, again, a close-up diagram of the bronchioles, the alveoli, and the pulmonary venule and the pulmonary arteriole, where the gas exchange takes place. So here's just a chart then summarizing the major structures, their description and their function. So here's the first ones here. These have been all described throughout this video and summarized here, and then the remaining ones are here, which you can have a look at your leisure.